Hello and welcome to Telegraph Studio and Business Reporter's Transforming Tax campaign, hosted by the Telegraph Online. I'm Alistair Greener. Innovation has become a buzzword in business vocabulary. We celebrate researchers and developers who've been bringing us solutions for our burning problems. They've helped us to travel faster, live healthier, feel more secure, and make our world a better place. This is why governments and international organisations acknowledge the value of innovation, both with intellectual property protection and financial support. So where is the UK on the map of patenting? Well, this is what we're going to discuss today with Jeremy Tier from How To. Good morning.
Morning.
The UK have been known for being great innovators for centuries. Are we still in that position? Are we still great innovators?
Absolutely. There's no question that we're not great innovators. I don't think it's the innovation problem that we're facing. It's the lack of protection of our innovation that's really hurting us.
So that lack of protection, is that causing us to slip down the pecking order in the world? And if so, why?
Substantially, the greatest problem, there's a great quote that says if it's worth copying, it's worth protecting. The problem for British industry is that they really can't afford, especially small businesses, where a lot of the innovation takes place, to actually invest in patenting. Patenting costs too much money. Generally, the fact of life of patenting is that you have to patent something before you've shown it to anybody, no matter about made any money out of it. So there's no income on which to actually finance any of the patent work.
So it sounds like other nations are better at doing that, at financing the IP. So first of all, which nations are they that are better at it than us? And secondly, what's the return do they get on it as a result?
In fact, nearly all of the European nations are better than the UK at helping and supporting patent activity. But if we just talk about the Americans for a second, the Americans see this as one of their key strategies in trade. If you want a trade deal with the Americans, you have to include an intellectual property agreement. It is a requirement that you protect, and the Americans see it very clearly, that their responsibility is to protect the innovations of their inventors within their country.
Okay, let's look at those American companies. Many of them, of course, are in the Fortune 500. So what sort of benefits are they getting typically as a result of protecting themselves?
There was a study done actually in 2002 of Fortune 500 companies. The view held was that 45 to 75% of the income of those companies came from intellectual property activity.
Well, I mean, that's a massive amount, and the government claim that they want to protect, they want to help organisations to protect their IP. What can we do to help that process?
Well, the government already have a scheme called Patent Box. They brought this scheme in four or 5 years ago originally, but it was vetoed in Germany under the European Community rules. It's been revamped to allow companies to claim. The problem with the scheme to a certain extent is that it's focused on income once the patent's been approved and actually working. So it's profits on the patent, which is great for big pharmaceutical businesses and businesses that have got a process rolling forward like car manufacturers. But for the SME, it's no use at all. The problem for an SME, I'm afraid, is that he's faced with a situation that he can't afford to carry out the intellectual property. He hopes that he can keep it a secret.
So what do we have to do to change the process to make it more effective?
I think the government needs to take a big decision. They've traditionally assumed that the responsibility for developing patents has been that of the business. I think government needs to step into that space in the same way the Americans have started to, and other countries in the world, and that is to start to take a responsibility for financing the patent work at the beginning. They should actually get involved in helping the process. The difficulty with patenting is that it's not a single exercise of getting a patent. It's a long 2 to 4 year process to claim global protection. And the government needs to help through that exercise. And then the real issue, the real problem, is the litigation. The greatest problem with a patent is if somebody decides to copy or counterfeit your product, you have to take them to court. And the cost of that can be really prohibitive for small businesses.
You're saying it's prohibitive. Let's talk some figures now. Let's take an SME who've got a patent, they've got something that they want to protect, taking it through all that process all the way through to litigation. What sort of figures are we talking about?
Simply patenting in the UK, the government says is about £4,000, but you've got to take on board the fact that they still need an advisor to help them do that, and the minimum fee that will be is probably about 10. After that, they've got to think about how they globalise that patent. Estimates for that range from £250 to £1 million. the costs of any litigation are just substantial. Quite often that litigation has to take place in the country where that activity is taking place. So you could find yourself having to run a court case in the United States, and we all understand how expensive that is.
You mentioned earlier on about this government scheme, the patent box scheme. Tell me a little bit more about how that actually works.
Well, in essence, the existing scheme is based on the idea that anything that you can demonstrate which is a profit made from your patent activity, you can reduce your taxes to 10%, approximately half in today's situation. The problem with the scheme, to a certain extent, is that other countries have similar schemes, and if you take Ireland next door, theirs is 6.5%. So it's not necessarily an attraction for any business to be here in the UK.
So again, coming back to another question, what would you change about the patent box scheme to make it work better?
We want government to focus at the beginning. We want them to support and finance patent activity. We believe that they should be doing that with SMEs. They have the intellectual property office, which is capable of carrying out assessment of that and already will offer a grant to do that type of work. We also believe that the government should get involved in helping businesses commercialise their intellectual property as they go through the process. We think as well that they should create some kind of litigation insurance to help small businesses be able to protect their patent activity.
Protecting IP is always important, but in Britain, of course, we have Brexit on the horizon. It's getting closer and closer. So how does that affect protection of IP now when we're dealing with ourselves in a different economic situation than before? How do we protect ourselves across those borders?
I think it's fundamentally important. I mean, the reality is that we're going to go out and negotiate trade deals with everybody. I mentioned the Americans earlier. They're committed to the idea a trade deal requires an intellectual property commitment. And I think the British government has to think in the same way. We have to be focused on that issue. If we're going to be successful in the future in WTO type conditions, it is going to be about innovation that's going to sell products. If we're competing, selling products that are commodities, we are not going to be successful.
And let's hope if we do concentrate on that innovation and we are good at protecting ourselves, we will become the great innovators again across the world. It's been fascinating finding out more. Jeremy Tier from How To. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.